Good evening and welcome. Thanks for joining us. My name is Steve Goldsmith. I'm with the Innovations in American Government program here at the Kennedy School, and I'd like to welcome you and thank the other two sponsors along with the Innovations program, Secretary Dan Glickman of IOP, who is here somewhere. Dan, thank you. And Paul Peterson, the Director of Program on Education Policy and Governance at the Kennedy School, who is another sponsor. Thank you very much, Paul. We also have with us tonight a number of individuals who are going to be joining us tomorrow for a conference on innovations in education, co-sponsored by the Innovations Program and by the Department of Education, and welcome to all of you. It's my privilege to introduce Secretary Page tonight. And just a couple things out of his very long resume. He's the son of public school teachers, and he has done every conceivable public school job, teacher, coach, school board member, which he just told me may have been the most difficult job he's had, dean of a school of education, and superintendent of a large urban school system. I got to know Secretary Page and observe him and learn from him when he was a superintendent of Houston's public school system, when its improvement for minority children led the country for urban school districts. He now is obviously not only the leader of the Department of Education, but of the No Child Left Behind Act. It's my privilege to introduce to you Secretary Rod Page.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve, for the warm introduction, and thank you for the honor of being here this afternoon. This forum has long provoked vigorous debate about the diverse issues that matters most to us in our society. So I appreciate the invitation to be here, so I need to thank Steve and Paul and Gail, Christopher, for this opportunity to come. To talk about something that is very dear to my heart and that of the President as well, and that is improving the quality of public education in the United States of America. Quite often when I speak, I cover overall subjects. Those subjects most associated with the No Child Left Behind Act of 2001. I talk about the President's effort to get the act passed, which was a real experience for me to see the quality of leadership that took place there. I talk about the President's progress to fund the bill and the good progress that we're making with all of the states in implementing it now. But as we approach the 20th anniversary of the groundbreaking report called A Nation at Risk, I begin to focus more on specific issues. Because 15 years after A Nation at Risk warned us that too many children are falling through the cracks of our education system, experts still estimated that 20 million kids couldn't read even at a basic level, and more than 25 million didn't even know the basics about the United States history. And of all the kids from all the high school levels, more than 20 million couldn't do basic math. Now, 20 years after that great bill, we've not made nearly the amount of progress that we'd like to see. And I don't think it was for lack of effort or lack of resources. Consider, between 1970 and 1995, per pupil spending shot up 75%. The number of students per teacher fell 25%. And the number of teachers with advanced degrees more than doubled. Yet, student achievement in the United States remained flat. Now, I spent my whole life either studying to get a good education or working to help others get a good education. And in all my years, I've seen many well-intended, well-funded, well-supported efforts to close the achievement gap, but the achievement gap still exists. So much reform, so little progress. Now, in all my years, though, I've never seen any movement with a greater potential for actually closing the achievement gap than the No Child Left Behind Act of 2001. I believe it's right on the money. And with each budget cycle since the President took office, he's worked to protect our investment in children. He's worked to protect the education budget with historic levels of funding targeted at the areas most in need. But the question now is, how do we turn those resources into results? How do we ensure that in another 20 years we're not still a nation at risk? How do we do that? I think we do it with a new law that says no child is to be left behind, with a new attitude that says every single child counts, and with a new area of accountability that said we're looking for results. I would even argue that the No Child Left Behind Act is the most powerful affirmative action program ever devised. We're working to fix the problem on the front end so that each child will have the opportunities that they deserve. Fix the problem on the front end so each child can get the education that they deserve and when it will make the most difference. But improving America's schools will take more than just a No Child Left Behind Act. It'll take something else. It'll take a new freedom and innovation and creativity in our public schools. A new freedom for parents to choose what is best for their children academically. And that's what I'd like to focus on a little bit today. Strengthening public education by empowering parents with choice. Notice, it's about strengthening public education through choice. Tomorrow here at Harvard, there's going to be a conference to discuss innovation in education. One topic I'm sure that's going to come up is choice. And I think it's pretty remarkable. In a conference about innovation, we're talking about choice. Only in education could choice be a topic of innovation. In almost every other aspect of our lives, choice would be a matter that we take for granted. This has even been designated as a choice, as a choice generation. Yet we're still talking about it as an innovation in education. Here we are, 3 years into the 21st century. We left behind the industrial age long ago. The great companies and great organizations that have not only survived but prospered have done so to the extent that they've been able to provide greater choice for their customers, greater options for their customers, and even to the extent of customizing services specific for customers. Yet, here we are today, preventing our schools from operating on the same great principle for success. Choice is essential for authentic public school reform, and I'll tell you why. Ours is a highly mobile, confident nation that has the greatest range of personal choices ever in the history of mankind. Look at the world we live in. Instant messaging, 24-hour news, personal websites, global markets, overnight express, e-commerce, customized for your particular taste. Every day presents new opportunities to tell what we see, what we hear, or what we do in our own personal taste. The world is moving towards more choice, not less. We're still trying to catch up with the present. I think Americans will not allow themselves to be boxed in by a monopoly any longer. In the 21st century, choice is not the exception, it's the rule. Only in education would choice be considered an innovation now. It's called risky, radical, innovative. I'm astonished. Our education system must change to reflect these new times for all parents and all children from all income levels. No Child Left Behind says we must empower parents by giving them a range of choices for the children's schooling, and many of them, what they come to expect is an opportunity to choose and be a part of their child's education life. Now, the defenders of the status quo argue that the current way of doing business is just fine. That gives parents a choice, that giving parents a choice is a bad idea. The choice would destroy the public school system. In fact, some have even claimed that the No Child Left Behind Act is designed to do just that. These people believe that 3 out of 4 fourth graders, urban fourth graders that can't read is just fine. We don't have a problem here. That's nonsense. We've got a big problem. And we can't continue speeding into the future looking through a rearview mirror. We've got to do something different. A necessary condition for strengthening public schools is the freedom of parents to choose and participate. This will strengthen public schools, not detract from them. Under the current monopoly system, public schools have no incentive to embark on reform, or no incentive to be competitive. There's no problem. The budgets won't be cut if they fail. The enrollment won't decline if they fail. Schools won't close down if they fail. There are no consequences for failure. And when parents are allowed to remove their children and the money that comes with them from failing schools, schools will respond. And when they respond, they'll respond with such vigor that we'll see the power of public schools that we've been underestimating all these years. Strong public school educators populating schools. When these schools respond, it'll unleash a wave of innovation, and it'll close the productivity gap, and we'll see the power of public schools. John Gardner found this when he's president of the Milwaukee School Board. In an article entitled High School Choice Help Public Schools, he wrote, and I quote, "As a left-wing organizer with 30 years experience in labor unions, workers' cooperatives, and poor communities, I knew working class and poor people did not want choice or public education, one or the other. They want both. They want both. It's not an either-or situation." 3 years later, evidence from Milwaukee, home of the nation's most ambitious program that let parents enroll their students where they want, demonstrates that choice works. Under Florida's A+ program, children in failing schools are offered a choice to leave with opportunity scholarships, or to remain at the school, which is eligible under the same program, and get increased funding. The opportunity for students to take their business someplace else is a powerful incentive to improve. If students have a choice, schools will begin treating them with the respect they deserve, instead of taking their enrollment for granted. We've seen on more than one occasion how choice can motivate public schools to improve. When philanthropist Virginia Gilder offered vouchers to disadvantaged students at Gibbon Elementary School in Albany, New York, 20% opted to take her up on that. In response, Superintendent Palmer sprung into action to improve the public schools. They hired a new principal in that district, replaced about a fifth of their teachers, and adopted a new curriculum with proven results for disadvantaged students. And the situation got better. It improved the public schools. I hear people say there's no room for these children in the private school world. There's no room for the public school system. That capacity doesn't exist. They must stay where they are, and we'll just do the best we can with them as we can. To that I say, I believe one of the most egregious sins that we've perpetrated on a child in a school is tying a child to a failing school, insisting that the child stays even though the school's not serving them well, and insisting that they stay at that school even though they're being crippled because there's no room for choice. The supply of private schools is not fixed. As demand for private schools increase, so will the supply. Entrepreneurial firms will see to that. In the cities with large-scale choice program, new private schools have been founded directly in response to the great demand for choice. This is not to say that the process is easy. It is not. It's difficult. But new schools will spring into action. We only need to look at the experience for charter schools to see the large number of schools that have been created in response to the demand for more and better schooling. The American people will demand change. In fact, they are demanding change. More than 500,000 students are now enrolled in roughly 2,700 charter schools nationwide. About 2 million children are homeschooled now. In many states, and I think in Texas, it's one of the fastest growing educational delivery systems in the country. The number of students learning through virtual charter schools also is growing. Under No Child Left Behind, if a child is not learning, and the school is not improving, then moms and dads can choose to move that child to a better performing public school or a better performing public charter school, or supplemental services after 3 years. The Supreme Court decision declaring vouchers constitutional was great news and a real step in the right direction for public education. No Child Left Behind says all parents deserve the right to choose a school for their child, just like the right to choose their own health care system, their retirement plan, or their family auto. Because all parents, no matter what their color, no matter what their religion, no matter whether they're rich or poor, they understand that education is the key to success and they deserve a great education. My parents were educators who pumped that into us as kids while we were growing up. In my family, we were going to get a good education or die trying. When people ask me why I decided to go to college, I used to respond because I enjoyed breathing, because there was no alternative to that. So does a parent named McGrady, a single mom raising 2 children. And 2 of her grandchildren as well are part of the family. She's so fearful that these kids might not get the right education and might fall in the footsteps of her older daughter, their mother, and drop out of school, that she sought a better school, one that would pay attention to them under the Cleveland Scholarship Program for low-income families. And she says, every day I wake up, I tell the children, today is another day of Thanksgiving, thanks to the scholarship program. Right here in Cambridge, according to a recent article in the Boston Globe, a parent named Stephen Plank seized the opportunity to provided by the law to transfer his 4 children to a school needing from a school needing improvement to another school, the Baldwin School. And he said, the Baldwin School is an excellent school, and my kids love it. I'm already seeing the difference in their grades. Competition works, and I speak from experience. While superintendent of schools in Houston, the 7th largest public school system in all of the United States, I didn't shy away from competition. I didn't shy away from choice. I embraced it. I knew that competition would make our system stronger. In fact, we adopted a strategic intent in Houston, which went like this. We're going to earn so much respect from the citizens of Houston that we become their K-12 delivery system of choice. We're going to earn so much respect from them until we become their K-12 delivery system of choice. And that was what we worked towards. So we didn't fear the competition coming from the private schools or from the charter schools, because we believe that when we're at our best, we're actually the best. In fact, we chartered schools. We chartered the KIPP Academy School. The first KIPP Academy School was born in our district that takes underachievers and turns them into scholars. We also launched a program that allows students to attend private schools in our community rather than go across the city to another crowded public school using another 45 or 50 minutes ride time on the school bus. If it was better for them to go to school in their community than ride an hour and a half on a school bus across town, we cooperated with that private school to make sure that they had that opportunity. We strengthened our system in Houston, and we won a national award for closing the achievement gap. So I know choice can make a difference. And there's early evidence of that that's real clear thanks to Paul Peterson. The findings are particularly strong among African-American students and disadvantaged students. I believe the nation's public schools are going to succeed by being innovative and entrepreneurial, and we're here to help. 4 months ago, we launched the new Office of Innovation and Improvement in the Department of Education. Its role is to identify, support, and promote promising innovation in education. Through its 25 grant programs and proactive outreach efforts, this office will provide needed resources to ideas of educators across the country. This is a high priority for us, and that is why Nina Reese was lured from the White House to head this program. Nina, are you here? Would you please stand? This is Nina Reese. She heads this office for us. As we work to implement the new education reform, I'm mindful that the charge can be difficult, but I'm also reminded of the words of Martin Luther King. It goes like this: every society has its protectors of the status quo, its fraternities of the indifferent, who are notorious for sleeping through revolutions. But today, our very survival depends on our ability to stay awake and to avoid going to sleep, to adjust to new ideas, and to remain vigilant, and to face the challenge of change. We must break the stranglehold on public education of those whose first concern is the system. This is about the children, not the system. We must clear away the barnacles that drag down and slow the growth of improvement of public education. Those who do not believe in the strength of the public education systems need our help. And those who have no confidence in the public school educators must be advised. Because when public schools are free to innovate, we will see the real power of public schools. That's the point, after all, the children in the public schools. Other delivery systems are fine too, but since 87% of our children are in public schools will be the heavy lifters, and that's the system we must fix. Strengthening our public schools is the mission of our president. He believes that educating our children is the most important thing we can do as a nation, and each and every one of us must work together towards helping the president achieve that vision. We all can help. Everyone can help. Volunteer for a public school right here in Boston. Sign up for Teach for America. Consider lunch in a charter school yourself, or preparing to be an urban superintendent. I take that back. I wouldn't advise you to do that. It's all of our problem, and we need all for our solution. I'll end this by using a phrase from Barbara Jordan, who I love dearly, that went like this: we may have come to this country on different ships, but we're in the same boat now. And my appeal is for the passengers in this boat to row together towards accomplishing the dream that the president has for our nation, creating in this country a system of public schools that educate all of our children and leave no child behind. God bless you, and God bless America. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. He'll now be pleased to answer your questions. If you'd line up behind the various mics and identify yourself and ask a question, and I'll move from mic to mic, and the Secretary will answer. So if we could start over here, please.
Hi, I'm Dan Obis. I'm a freshman at the college. Recently, there's been a move toward resegregation in the public schools. Not a deliberate attempt, but that seems to be the trend. And I'm wondering whether this movement toward choice is, in your opinion, going to sort of reintegrate the school systems, or whether some other active attempt is needed to provide integration.
I'm not familiar with any evidence that suggests that it would do so. And so I'm operating on the basis of the belief that it would not impact that negatively. But I'm also emboldened with the idea that the most powerful thing we can do for integration and to defeat segregation is to make sure that every child has a quality education. When a child has a quality education, they'll be able to manage this society successfully, and they can live or go to school or choose as they may.
Yes, sir.
Sir, how you doing? My name is Bill McCamley. I am a second-year public policy student here from Las Cruces, New Mexico. In my state, there are 4 cities with 2 high schools or more. The rest of the communities are basically either single high school or, in many cases, single school communities. One of the things that concerns the legislators in our state when you're talking about school choice is in rural places. You talk, most specifically about urban school systems, but in rural school systems where there's basically only enough resources for a very, very small system, will public school choice create charter schools that separate out the system, creating a dual school system in a place that just doesn't have the resources to support those dual school systems on economies of scale? Thank you.
First of all, I must repeat that our focus is on the child, not the system. The system, for me, has a single purpose, and that is to cause growth on the part of the child. And if the system is not causing growth on the part of the child, what is your argument for continuing the system? I think that the second point would be the entrepreneurial community will respond to that. Almost like if you build them, they will come. We think that when there are opportunities for choice, the entrepreneurial system will respond to that, and there'll be opportunities for choice. Maybe a group of teachers will start a tutorial company, or maybe there will be a cyber school that will be available for them. We don't think that that would be a problem right now.
Hi, my name is Felicia Escobar. I'm actually a native of Texas, so welcome to colder weather. I was going to ask you about the No Child Left Behind Act. The promise of the No Child Left Behind Act is to provide results for all children and to make sure that all children are receiving adequate education. A part of that promise was also funding and making sure that schools actually had the money to produce those results. I know that the Senate voted down and has given some money, but voted down a larger amendment to give all the money that was needed to actually implement the No Child Left Behind Act. How are you working with schools to do what they can with the resources that they have, which are obviously not enough to actually do what the Act's intent is?
Well, I'm not sure I would agree with that. I think there's sufficient funding in the Act to cause the results that we're seeking. Besides, we have 3 decades of history to show that we can't spin our way out of this problem. We spent billions of dollars since 1965, the initial enactment of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, and the results are pretty flat. In fact, 8th grade, 4th graders are reading about the same now as they were in 1984, though the spending has just skyrocketed. Our per pupil spending is up. State spending is up. Federal spending is up. Just a few years ago, the federal share of per pupil expenditure was about 7%. Now it's approaching 9%. Clearly, resources are important. Clearly, we could use more money if we could get more money. But I think the best way to get more money is to demonstrate that the money that we have is causing the effect that we seek.
Thank you. Yes?
Hi, I'm Kit Nichols from Pioneer Institute, and my question is, what can organizations outside of the Department of Education, such as Pioneer, a think tank, or the Kennedy School, do to help you and your colleagues further the goals of Nclb?
Well, one of the things that we appreciate that they are doing and can do is continue to discuss these important issues so that we can get the right ideas. Make sure that these ideas are well researched and we know as much as we can about them. One of the 4 pillars of the No Child Left Behind Act is what works. We literally don't know exactly what works. We are learning more about what works in reading, but we don't know what works in English language acquisition. We don't know what works in math as well as we should. So there's a lot to be learned about pedagogy and about the teaching and learning process. And so we deeply appreciate the thinkers who are part of this solution.
Hi, my name is Victoria Alzapiti. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm a mid-career student here at the Kennedy School, and before coming to the Kennedy School, I was a civil rights attorney and worked for the past 9 years as the founder and director of a nonprofit called the Title IX Advocacy Project. And we work with middle school and high school students, both boys and girls, very co-ed approach to promote gender equity in school and prevent gender discrimination and gender-based violence. And you mentioned how important it is for parents to have a choice concerning their child's education. And I wanted to express to you 2 real major concerns that parents have come to me with. One is their concern that under Title IX, which is the law that requires that all schools provide equal opportunity for both male and female students, they're concerned that the Bush administration is looking at single-sex education, and instead of making certain and ensuring that our schools provide equity and equal opportunity for male and female students, they're looking towards creating more single-sex opportunities, and they're concerned about that because they want their children to learn in co-ed environments that reflect our nation and our world. And the other concern they have is that they want their daughters and their sons to be able to play sports. And as you know, this year there was a commission pulled together to look at the Title IX regulations that deal with athletics. And right now, this past February, there were recommendations made. And they're very concerned that what's happening is that boys and girls are being pinned against each other instead of working together with their schools to find ways to make it possible for boys and girls to both play sports, that the commission is coming out with recommendations that might jeopardize students' opportunities to play. And I wanted to convey that to you because you mentioned entrepreneurism and leadership. And I'm wondering what ideas you have about how the Bush administration can really take leadership and create positive and viable opportunities for Title IX to remain in existence. And I'd like to offer you my support. If you'll be here for the next 24 hours, I'd love to meet with you and talk with you to brainstorm some ideas together.
Well, thank you for your obviously good work. About the single-sex schools, the Bush administration is not mandating single-sex schools. We have a fundamental philosophy that includes flexibility and local control. We believe that parents should have the option if that's an option that they would like to choose. So then, that's how we approach that. As far as Title IX is concerned, I don't think you could find any stronger supporters of Title IX in the Bush administration than us. Title IX was an issue that the commission was impaneled to discuss. It was a broad-based commission. It had wonderful people on it from every aspect of our life. Why should we fear debating the core issues that guide our society? We got the very best thinkers there, representing all sides of thought, and ask them to debate these ideas and to discuss them and to go across the country and to hear from America and come back to us and tell us if there's anything we need to do to make sure that all Americans are served well. Title IX is absolutely in no danger, is to be strengthened because we appreciate the accomplishments under Title IX. We just want to make sure that all Americans are served well and there are no unintended consequences as a result of the way it is enforced now.
Right, I would just encourage you, I know there is a lot of debate about the report, and as a leader and as the Secretary of Education, I really encourage you to...
There really shouldn't be a lot of debate about the report. The report was debated itself, and there were 15 members there. We took only the consensus recommendations, the recommendations that everybody agreed on. Subsequent to that, two of the commissioners who voted on the recommendations decided to take a different point of view. So there's no real debate about that.
Well,
It's
can
just
you and
that
I
they
meet?
are,
Is it
they are
possible?
disrespecting the other members of the commission.
Is it possible?
All right,
President?
all right.
I would love to.
You can find him somehow, or he's got some staff here. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, yeah. Just so we're not too monotonous, let's take two questions up there so we don't have to develop a routine. You got a long line, so just take the next two up there.
My name is Naomi Walcott. I'm a Master of Public Policy student at the Kennedy School, and I have a question. How will school choice affect children in state custody, such as foster care, or children who do not have parents actively participating in their educational development?
Well, that's, first place, if a child does not have a parent, we hope there is some quality adult in their life who will help them with the decisions that they must make. Otherwise, the schools have to adopt that role. But the greatest determinant of success or failure of a child in school and maybe even in life is the quality of the adult relationship in their lives. So we hope that some adult will be there for them.
Hello, my name is Shannon Odie, and I'm a master's student at the Graduate School of Education here at Harvard. And a bit of a follow-up to that question, considering the growing number of non-native English-speaking students and parents that we have in our public school system, how will those parents, considering that the onus is on them now as personal advocates for their students, for their children, how will this affect them, considering that most of this advocacy needs to take place exclusively in English?
Well, I wouldn't put it that way that the onus is on them. An opportunity is provided for them to make a decision that they feel is best for their children. Just like the other decision that they're going to make. Decisions about their child's health care would be an example. It would be no different.
Yes, sir.
I'm Jonathan Levy. I'm a student here at the Kennedy School. I have two quick questions for you. First of all, early on when you were speaking, you said that that No Child Left Behind could take care of the affirmative action problem on the front end. This seems to imply that minorities haven't gotten the opportunities based on a lack of qualifications versus discrimination. I'd love for you to comment on that, first of all. Second of all, CNN.com says, this year for the first time, schools risk losing federal money if they don't provide teachers and students the chance to express constitutionally protected prayer. I was wondering if you could comment on that, as one of the core values of this country is separation of church and state. Thanks.
Absolutely, and that's as it should be. Repeat that first question again for me.
Yeah, affirmative action. You're talking about dealing with the problem of affirmative action, or the problem that affirmative action would deal with on the front end.
We believe that when children are given a quality education, especially early on, that would increase the pool of young people who are eligible on their own merits to attend the prestigious universities across the United States. Mm-hmm. So, thank you.
Do you think, though, that's why affirmative action has been in place? Why people are advocating for affirmative action, that there's a lack of qualified candidates?
I'm not sure I understand that part of it.
It seems to me you're talking about increasing the pool of qualified candidates, and minority candidates, yes?
Continue the sentence. Increase the pool of qualified candidates who can enter the prestigious universities on their own merit.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi there, Secretary Page. I'm Seth Andrew. I'm a high school history and special education teacher here in Cambridge.
Thank you.
And like you, I'm a strong supporter of charter schools and especially the choice movement within public education. However, I found your speech largely oxymoronic in that you're arguing for the support of public schools and vouchers at the same time, which are accountable to private institutions and have no public accountability whatsoever. So, I, for one, as a person who wants to start a charter school, see a very bright line between public charter schools that are paid for by public dollars and accountable to the public, and private voucher schools that are accountable to their board of directors, their mission statement, and sometimes shareholders. And instead of melding the two together, I wonder why the Bush administration has brought them together to say that public education includes these private schools that are accountable to shareholders rather than the public itself and the civic purpose of schools as a whole.
First of all, I think that this crisp distinction between what is public and what is private, it doesn't exist. You know, there's much overlap between public and private. I'll argue with you on another level too. You know, most of this system we call a public school is a structure. It's not a concept. For example, I'll use the Texas Constitution for example. I know most about that, I guess, which has a clause in it that says something to the effect that every student in Texas is due a free and appropriate public education. Now, it doesn't dictate the structure. It doesn't say you've got to line it up and do it this way. We did that because it facilitates the kind of productivity that we want. The point is that the child is due a free and appropriate education at the expense of the public. And so that's public education. And so because if the child gets an education at the expense of the public, that is public education. So this crisp distinction doesn't exist. Let me finish. Okay. In addition to that, my argument is that monopolies don't work. They are inefficient. Okay? So I can argue that public schools would be helped, not only on a philosophical level, but on a practical level, because I've actually done it, when they are freed to be innovative, and when they have this little tension that comes from the competition of it. They get innovative, they do a lot better. And so that's the way these two things connect. And that's why I consider choice as a necessary condition for authentic public school reform. And by the way, vouchers would be just one way of getting choice. There are a lot of different choice mechanisms. Vouchers would just be one.
I would just follow up and say that those institutions that are, by definition, private and are using tax dollars from all of us and serving a board of trustees and the mission of that institution are no longer public schools.
Let me ask you a question. Have you ever heard of the GI Bill?
Of course.
Okay, the GI Bill was a voucher program. Have you ever heard of the Pell Grant program?
And at the higher education
level? The
level?
Pell Grant program would be essentially the same thing. We provide money to students, and they go choose any school that they want to. And you know another thing? Have you ever wondered why right in the center of our big cities, you find prestigious higher institutions of higher education, right there. But in these big urban centers, it's very difficult to get public education in. I think part of it is because of the monopolies that they operate under. So we're talking about strengthening public schools, and I believe that we've got to free public schools from the chokehold that they have around their clientele, and as a result, I believe public schools can perform on the par with any other system, maybe even better because their people are trained much better. So this is an argument for strengthening public schools, not the reverse.
The questions are great, but we're also running out of time, so one question per person, okay? Thank you very much.
My name is Ben Piper, and I am an incoming doctoral student in the Graduate School of Education, but more importantly, I'm an 8th grade social studies teacher in a Title I school in South Carolina. My question is this. My school has above 92% free and reduced poverty rate. My school has above 45% ESOL students. We already instituted the limited school choice this year. And what happened with our incoming students is we lost all of the students, number one, who were whites, because our population is 90% African American and Hispanic. We had 2 white 6th grade students. We have basically no parental involvement from those 6th grade students at all. So my question is, when we institute these kind of programs you're talking about in poor schools, Title I schools like mine, what will happen to our schools when the cream of the crop of our poor students leaves and we're left with the poorest? And keep in mind, this is a school where we have the South Carolina Principal of the Year, the South Carolina Media Specialist of the Year. This is a good school. But what's going to happen when all of the cream of the crop leave that school? My question is,
Why did they leave?
They left because our test scores are terrible. But the Secretary Page, this is the problem I have.
Yeah.
What we're going to be left with, improvements need to be made, but what will be left in my school are the poorest of the poor, and that'll happen throughout the country.
But there's nothing in the poor people's DNA that will stop them from being productive.
No.
So what we want to do now, and by the way, now I'm not being sharp at you.
Right.
There are islands of excellence all across America where we have 100% free and reduced lunch, where students are knocking the tops off the exam, where they're outperforming suburban schools. They're all over. And if you want to find some of them, go to the Ed Trust on the web. You'll find a list of 5,000 of such schools. And so if you want parents to come to those schools, do something attractive in the school by being a great school. This is a high school example because I know it best in Houston, where I was superintendent of schools in one of the most deprived communities in Houston. 100% African American, in the deep, deep part of the system, ghetto.
That's my school. But our scores are going up and up and up.
Ghetto. And then what happened is they made a vanguard school out of this school, a talented school, and bumped up the academics in that school. And guess what happened? We found Anglo students coming into the ghetto to go to that school, and parents fighting to get enrollment in that school. So the academic excellence of the school can itself be a magnet. So I'm not deterred at all by situations like that. The solution to it is improve the performance of the school.
But those poor kids who are left behind is my question.
No, they're not left behind. They're not. The poor kids can learn too.
But I don't understand. I just don't understand it.
Why is it so difficult to believe that just because kids are poor, that we can't teach them to high standards? And if parents are leaving because the standards are low and the performance is low, that's as it should be. They want their children to be in an environment where the standards are high and the performance is high. And so that's the solution to the problem that you got. Make sure that the standards are high and the performance is high in that school. And I would personally guarantee you that the parents will come back to that school in big numbers. You won't have a place to put them.
What about those kids whose parents don't care enough to move them?
I got to answer this. I got to answer this. The school can make the difference. Now, we can't wait until children have ideal parents like Oz and Harriet.
That's right.
We've got to teach the children with the circumstances that they bring to the school. And this can happen. Why are we arguing about this now? The evidence is clear all across the nation, with people who are kids that are coming to school very deprived, many who don't have parents to support them, but still they are performing well. It can be done.
Thanks for your questions. We got time for about 2 more questions. Yes, sir, and then we'll Well, if we can do these quickly, we'll just do one in front of each of these three mics, and then the secretary will have to go.
Hi, good evening, Secretary Page. My name is Jonathan Bryce. I'm a member of the Harvard Graduate School of Education Urban Superintendent's Program, training to be one of those individuals that lead urban school districts.
Could we have a moment of silence for this gentleman?
My question, I'm in agreement that it is about the students, that the most important thing that public schools, or any schools for that matter, can do is to provide all of their students with a rigorous and challenging education. My concern is that with No Child Left Behind, certain provisions in that particular piece of legislation actually penalize schools that have not been performing by taking away financial resources from those schools that should be used to provide for professional development, for maybe also some structural changes that would allow that particular school or that school district to improve its actions so that it can increase the achievement level of students. Could you address that, please?
Yes, I can. The No Child Left Behind Act, I think, and I'm just guessing here, but I think I'm pretty correct, was made a little tough. I think it was a congressional response to the reality that we've been doing this since 1965. We spent billions of dollars since 1965, and we've gotten scant results. So this act is intended not to fund failure. We've been funding failure.
And I would agree with that, sir, but I think the difference is that between funding failure, which we can all agree that many schools, particularly in urban areas, have not been successful for students that look like myself, that look like you, that look like, you know, other people of minority groups in our country. But the real issue is that do we make change by taking resources away from schools that can be used to change what we're actually doing for students? That's my concern.
Okay, let me tell you what the bill does. It takes money away from systems that fail and gives the money to the child where it's intended in the first place. You see, the funds in the Elementary and Secondary Education Act are there to supplement what is being provided by the state, not to supplant it. And so it's to give the child an edge. And so if you would continue to provide resources to an institution in order to get something in return, and you don't get it in return, what would you do?
Well, I mean, I agree. We have a major issue in public education. The issue is that students are not achieving at levels that we can all agree on it would be acceptable.
Right.
The question is, how are we going to do that? And
we know how to do that because there are islands of excellence, schools all across the nation that are doing it.
That's true, but we also need to bring those issues to scale. And the question is, how do you bring things to scale? How do you go not from just a particular classroom, but to an entire school, to a group of schools, and a district?
The way we bring it to scale is to discontinue funding failure. There has to be consequences for failure, otherwise it just continues. There's no reason for it to change.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Just one and short, and one and short, and then we're trying to get the secretary to a plane. So
okay.
Thank you very much.
My name is Dave Kramer. I work for an organization here in Boston called Citizen Schools, which is currently expanding nationally, including 2 campuses in Houston. It's an after-school program provider in partnership with Boston Public Schools and other community organizations like the YMCA and whatnot. Right now, I'm in the second year of helping out with a pilot project called 8th Grade Academy, which is basically what we're trying to do is get 8th graders to understand how to be successful in high school and beyond, and taking them to colleges and whatnot. One thing that I've discovered is that, along with my colleagues, is that Boston has a very mesmerizing array of choices for high school. Pilot schools, charter schools, parochial schools, district schools, etc. And our kids and their families really want to make the most out of this, but their families are very bought into, for the most part, into their kids' education. We have 100 8th graders that we're working around the clock with.
We need a question. We're going to run out of time.
Here comes the question. That we're trying to help understand how to choose a high school, and it's a very intensive process. I would like to push on you further to explain how you think parents and communities can make smart choices. It's not like choosing turkey or tuna or Honda or Hyundai. I think it's much more complex choice, and we need to
Well,
address that.
one of the things that the bill provides for would be report cards that go to the communities, so that parents and citizens can see from this report card how the school is performing. And that would be one of the bits of information that a parent could use on making that choice. The other thing would be making a choice based on the adults in the building and how they relate to their particular child, or what subjects are featured there, what interests they have. There are a lot of different ways that they make choice. I don't think that parents making choices will be much of a problem for us. Once those choices are provided, parents will make them. Even now, when choices are not provided, parents are making choices by going to other systems and having bogus addresses in order for that child to attend a better school. There was one study I read about in Chicago where there were hundreds of parents from really poor communities who had bogus addresses in the suburbs in order to send their children out to the suburban schools to get a better education. I think we drastically underestimate parents if we don't think that they are able to make choices that's in their best interest.
Okay, last question. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My name is Devika Premwardna. I'm a master's student in the Divinity School. Secretary Page, the aggregate data that you cite about increases in pupil expenditure, they all sound very nice, but as is usually the case with aggregate data, when you get down to the particulars, to the distribution of it, you find that things are a little bit more messy. And the fact remains that the expenditure figures are not distributed equally to all children in all school districts. But when we talk about the failure of public schools, you and I both know that not all public schools are failing. Suburban school districts tend to do successfully, phenomenally successfully in many cases. This leads me to believe that something more than a deficiency in creativity and innovation is involved in the failure of schools. And I think it's no coincidence that the suburban school districts are the ones that have the largest budgets and are therefore able to draw in the best teachers and provide most up-to-date textbooks and schools that aren't crumbling. And I'd like you to address this issue of...
Well, I think that's not always the case. In fact, the Stannis and Poor's study of Michigan and Pennsylvania will make that case. Go to the web and look up that study. I think that you'll find that it's quite different. And by the way, you did make a point that we clearly agree with. Public schools are not, as a group, failing. We're talking about changing the paradigm. We're talking about not educating just some of our children like we're doing now. We're doing a wonderful job in educating some of the children. But we're talking about educating all of the children. When we say no child left behind, for us, it is not a statement of pious sentimentality. It is an expectation, because we see that this can actually be done. We know where there are lots of wonderful places where some students in that school are just sailing and doing a wonderful job, graduating with high averages and being able to gain admission at prestigious universities like this. But when you disaggregate the data and you look down deep underneath, those averages are hiding a lot of failure. This act is targeted directly at that group of students. In fact, on the front page of the bill, it has these words, "an act." The second line is to close the achievement gap. So its whole purpose is that.
With all due respect, it is a statement of...
Thanks. The questions are great. The questions are really great, and so are the answers. But we promised the secretary that we would excuse him at 7 o'clock, and so unless you have closing remarks.
No, nothing I would enjoy better is just standing talking to you more about it, because I believe that you are interested in all the children having opportunity too.
Yeah.
And so I think that we would agree on that.
With all due respect, I do believe that it is a statement of pious sentimentality, unless the funds are there to back up.
But you see, your argument that the funds are not there might need examining. What has happened since 1965 has been just a big increase in funding. It has been really great. Go examine that. You'll find it out.
But do you not acknowledge that there's a disparity?
It's up to you.
Joe Nathan from Minneapolis.
No, he made me a deal. He said, I can make the last statement, I can let you make it. Which one do you think I'm going to do?
I'm going to praise you.
I'm going to let you make it.
Mr. Secretary, my name is Joe Nathan. I'm from Minneapolis, and for 30 years I've been listening to the kinds of comments that I hear from young people which really concern me. Having been an inner city public school teacher and administrator, I've seen choice produce improvements.
We have a post-secondary options law that lets high school kids go to colleges and universities. The high schools have improved dramatically. We've seen inner city schools which have produced major achievement gains. We've seen that money is not always the most important factor. There are two professors here at Harvard, Murnane and Levy, who talked about more money is the answer sometimes, and talked about how inner city schools can increase student achievement. So I want to thank you for raising the issue, for insisting that young people can learn regardless of race, regardless of color, regardless of income. And I want to ask you, what do you see are the most important things that those of us who believe strongly in carefully developed school choice programs, what are the most important things that you think that we could do to help spread these programs, and frankly also to help young people here at Harvard, who some of us are concerned about some of the kinds of questions that you're getting asked?
See, I knew it was a good thing to let you have that statement. I think what all of us could do is, although the gentleman described it as a statement of high sentimentality, I think careful examination will find that we underestimate children. And we sell them short. And the reason that it's important for us to expect all children to learn is simple. For example, if you do not believe all children can learn, and you evidence that all children are not learning, there's a certain peace that you can experience. Nothing disturbs you. The world is right. But if you believe that all children can learn, and you evidence that all children are not learning, that is a certain kind of disturbance that is brought about there that's going to send you in a different kind of direction. The motivation is going to be there now. You've got to ask a real important question now. Why is it that this child is not learning? With the other mindset, you don't have to ask that question ever. We want the question asked. Why is this child not learning? This doesn't matter about the child's socioeconomic circumstances, or the accent of that speech, or whether they just came across the border yesterday, or whether they got two parents or one or none. That's the important question that we want everybody to ask each individual child, so that we can move towards the day that we can create in America schools that are worthy of a great nation like we have in America. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Nancy, how are you doing? Yeah, I'm almost done. Are you okay? What were you going to ask? I was actually going to ask about, well, after somebody else can ask,